that this is illuminating. Lighting for apartment buildings. So on the cover here, we have a photo of an apartment building which actually participated in the Mosman Council Apartment and Strata Savings Program in 2020 and went on to do an LED lighting upgrade. So we'll come back to this strata building as a case study partway through this session. We'll be talking for about 30 minutes, and after that we'll have plenty of time for questions which you can put in through the comments box. The two councils have kindly supported 3 other webinars that are coming up, and they'll be in the areas of hot water, solar and ventilation. So this is the contents. This is what we're going to be covering in the next 30 minutes. And basically we're going to have a look at how lighting forms a part of sustainability for your apartment block. And then we'll look at individual areas of apartment buildings and what can be done to save money and improve amenity. Today, I'll use the words owners corporation and body corporate interchangeably. And we've got some stats from the Australian Strata Insights report to kick us off with. There are now 2.2 million apartments in Australia, representing 15% of households, and 340,000 strata schemes across the country, with an insured value of $1.1 trillion. What is sustainability in apartment buildings? Sustainability can cover a range of energy and water saving measures, waste, and future-proofing the building in areas such as solar, batteries, and electric vehicle charging. So our hope is that the 340,000 strata schemes across Australia start to resemble the picture like you see on the slide here at the present. So why might we upgrade lighting in apartment buildings? Well, the apartment buildings in Australia are consuming $2.7 billion of electricity each year. And that's equivalent to about 7.3% of the total national energy grid in Australia's consumption. In small apartment blocks, such as a townhouse or a 3-story walk-up, common area lighting is actually sometimes 100% of the electricity costs on the common area or shared meter. As we get into larger apartment buildings, it's still a significant component in the lighting. So that's why it's such an important area to have a look at. And most people have heard of LED lighting, but they're not actually aware that the 3 scientists from Japan and the US that created it actually won a Nobel Prize for it back in 2014. And that's because the LED lighting is such a leap forward in lighting. We had incandescent and fluorescent lighting the 20th century, and the 21st century is going to be completely lit by LED lighting and motion-censored LED lighting. It's also a fantastic invention to help 1.5 billion people across the planet who still don't have access to an electricity grid, because solar and batteries will be able to provide some power for using this low energy LED lighting. A second important consideration for apartment buildings is just lowering the common area electricity bills. And when you lower the common area electricity bills, this will either give your strata committee the ability to reduce strata levies, or build up that capital works fund which can be used for future projects to improve your building. To give you an idea, if you took a typical apartment block of say 40 apartments, and you switched all the common area lighting that might be fluorescent lighting across to motion censored LED, you might save in the order of 60% off the current common area electricity bill. And while it's difficult to generalize across different size apartment blocks, because hopefully we've got people here that live in townhouses, low rise, medium rise, and maybe a couple of high rise today. But based on the buildings that we've worked with over a number of years, larger buildings are able to save $13,000 a year on average through upgrading their LED lighting. So there are some other benefits that are non-financial when you move to LED lighting as well. It can reduce heat in the hallways of the building. It can reduce the amount of insects which are attracted to the lighting. It can reduce annual fire compliance testing costs, and you can actually increase the lux level and have more uniform light for less cost. And finally, any improvements in lighting moving to LED will cut carbon emissions for the building. Now, what are some of the barriers to upgrading lighting in strata? We have to deal with the split incentives issue. So according to that National Strata Insights report that just came out, 48% of the apartments in Australia are rented out. This means you've got owner investors and owner occupiers who have two different objectives with the building. Owner investors are typically looking for the best return on their investment. The owner occupier actually wants the amenity of the block to be improved because they're actually living in the building. You also have the tenants and other associated people. So it's always a challenge navigating split incentives in strata. And we know that communication and apathy has been a long-running problem in most strata schemes across Australia. But there is a lack of information, and that's what webinars such as today's webinar are trying to do, to try and unpack some of the challenges around lighting in different parts of a residential strata building and make it more accessible so that this can be communicated through strata committees and into upgrade projects. Access to finance can also be a challenge for strata if there's not a large balance in the capital works fund. And finally, you've got a trade-off. When it comes to upgrading lighting, you could light up an apartment block like a Christmas tree and it could look fantastic, but it's going to consume a lot of power. On the other hand, you could drive the lighting down so much that it starts to not be a safe environment for people to move around in areas like car parks or fire stairs if you push too hard on the energy savings. So there's a little bit of a trade-off, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're bringing up a case study here. This is the Cedars. This is an apartment block that's for over 55s that participated in Mosman Council's apartment and strata savings project. Now, they had a basement car park and it had fluorescent lighting throughout the basement car park. And they started with a small project just to upgrade these lights. It cost about $2,000. And those lights in the basement car park, the savings will actually pay off the cost of the products and the labor to install it in about 1.5 years. They also upgraded lights in the pool area, and they're testing motion censored emergency lights in their corridors as well. So it's likely that they might do further projects now that they've got their confidence up. We'll come back. There's another item that we'll deal with relating to this, but this is just to give you an idea that even for a small apartment block, a project that's not terribly expensive can give you a good financial return in a very short period of time. So the opportunity that we've got as we move into the different sections of apartment buildings is lighting can be upgraded in car park areas, in foyers and lift lobbies as you move up different levels of the block, in garbage rooms or garbage chute rooms, which sometimes appear on each floor of an apartment building, and in the fire stairs area. Now, this is not to say that there aren't other areas which can be upgraded. Of course, you can upgrade lighting in plant rooms, pool, gym, leisure areas, and garden locations if you've got them. But we'll put a bit more of a focus just on these 4 areas today. But let's move into the car park area, and we'll just talk about what we've actually got happening maybe in a residential apartment building, underground basement car park. So typically you'll have 4-foot lights in this area, 1200 millimeter lights for people that use the metric system. And you'll have a mix of these 4-foot batten lights that are standard lights and battery backed up lights that would stay on in the event of a power outage. You're likely to have some green running man exit lights near fire exits or fire stairwells to get out of the car park area. And a lot of these car park areas have had, you know, a mix of 4-foot and 2-foot fluorescent batten lights for a long period of time. If 5 years ago you did an LED retrofit tube project to put temporary LED tubes into the existing fittings that used to have fluorescent lights, well, you could still get another 15% energy savings if you were now to upgrade those to a full motion censored LED light. The technology now, compared to 5 years ago in LED, has become much more efficient again. Now, if you were designing an upgrade project for your basement car park, you've got to think about the different sections of the car park. There's the main thoroughfares, maybe entry and exit ramps, and then there's the car parking spaces, maybe visitor car parking spaces, and a car wash bay, maybe a loading bay. Now, behind your private car parking spot in an apartment building, the amenity concern that you have to consider is you're coming back with the shopping from your local shopping trip, you're opening the boot of your car, you want to be able to easily see what's in there. Now, a basement car park should have a uniform 40 lux throughout the entire basement car park area. That's just regulation. Now, if you're not sure what the lux is in your basement car park area, you could download a mobile phone app from the App Store and actually go and test it using your mobile phone. A couple of examples of apps that you could download are Lux Camera, Galactica, Lux Meter, and Lux Light Meter Pro. You could get one of these apps and actually walk into your car park area and test the lighting level. You might actually be below the building code. So designing a new solution of motion censored LED lighting for the car park area, you're not allowed to drop the lighting to nothing so it's pitch black. To cater for safe movement, you're only allowed to dim the lights down to about 20% of their brightness when no one is around. And then, of course, the motion sensors, which have maybe an 8-meter range, will detect either a person or a car and bring the lighting back up to full strength. Now, people that were trying to get the most energy savings out of basement car park areas started putting 2-foot lights over private car spaces and 4-foot lights maybe down the main thoroughfares where the cars drive. Well, a recent innovation is some companies are now providing 4-foot LED motion sensor batten lights that have a half power mode. What a half power mode does is only lights up half of the little dots, the LED dots on that light. But the benefit you're getting is a 4-foot light spreads light further than a 2-foot light spreads the light. So a 4-foot batten light in half power mode is only consuming the same energy as a 2-foot motion sensored LED light, but it's spreading that light a little bit further, helping you see what's in the boot of your car when you're getting your shopping Some other things to consider when you're designing an LED lighting solution for a basement car park, and this goes back to our case study at the Cedars in Mosman. If you've got a lift that comes into the basement car park area, the light immediately outside the lift, there was a concern at the Cedars that this shouldn't be set on a motion sensor and being dimmed down, because the older residents wanted plenty of light to help them safely exit the lift and get into the car park area. Now, what happened was, after the residents got used to their motion censored lighting in the car park and they became confident with how it was detecting them with an 8-meter range, then they actually said, look, we actually do think it's safe now to change that light that's in front of the lift entry into the car park and make that also a motion censored light. So keep in mind, as the motion sensor technology has moved from, say, infrared sensors now to microwave sensors, it's not as jerky a change. It's a smoother transition from a dim down light mode up to the full strength mode. And even elderly residents are finding that these motion sensors are now quite comfortable once they get used to them. So let's jump into foyer lighting for apartment buildings. This is probably one of the most difficult areas to design a lighting solution for. So let's just think about, we've got all manner of different foyer entries into apartment buildings, but first you might have a light which is actually outside the door in the elements, exposed perhaps where it could get rain splashed on it. So a light that's outdoors needs higher water resistance, and this is measured in ingress protection rating, or IP rating. So you might want an IP65 light, which is going to be outdoors, whereas indoors you may not need that level of water resistance. Maybe in a car park area you might want some water resistance, but maybe at ingress protection level 44 instead of 65. The other thing to think about in a foyer area is the color temperature of lights. So this is measured in Kelvin, and 3000, 4000, 5000 Kelvin is an indication of, let's call it the warmth of the light. So around 3000 Kelvin, you've got a daylight, warm, sort of sunny light. As you move through 4, 5, up to 6, it becomes very blue, very white, very clinical. So if, for example, you're replacing downlights in a foyer area, you can now buy tricolor downlights, which are switchable to the different color temperatures. And you might choose that you want a warmer light in the foyer area. For people that have compact fluorescent CFL lights in their foyers, they're the twirly lights that you used to buy from the supermarket. These need to be replaced with LED over time, and you might want to get like a 6.5-inch cutout LED unit that actually replaces entirely those old containers that held the CFLs. In foyer areas, again, you need to have your green running man exit lights. The green running man exit lights often have fluorescent tubes in them. Just keep in mind it's more expensive in terms of the time to get a payback on replacing one of those green running man exit lights, because the battery is quite expensive in relation to the energy savings that you get from replacing one of those lights. Another thing that you find as you go through lift lobbies in apartment buildings sometimes is emergency non-maintained lights. Now, this is usually a square box that you never see illuminated, and it is designed to only come on in the event of a power outage. Now, with the advances in circular LED motion censored lights, these are now getting removed from the buildings and are no longer really necessary. Sometimes you find them in fire escapes as well. Let's move on. So let's talk about garbage room lighting. This is the dirtiest that this presentation is going to get. So the garbage room, the garbage chute, these areas are perfect for motion censored LED lighting. If you think about it, people are approaching them with their garbage in one hand, and they're going to use their other hand to lift the bin lid. Now, where there have been light switches in the garbage rooms and garbage areas, these have been notorious for people leaving the lights on. And even when the strata puts messages there, please turn off the lights, invariably no one goes through and takes any notice of the message. So what you can do is ask your electrician to come in, bypass the light switch in the garbage area, if you have one, and put in a motion censored light. In this part of the building, particularly if you've got a garbage area that might be outside the main building, out on the street area, you don't have the same concerns around safe movement. So you can actually set your motion censored light to dim down to nothing when no one's around. And also think about using a daylight sensor. A light with a daylight sensor won't operate when there's enough ambient light, and it'll just come on at dusk. And when I say come on, it'll only come on to an active mode where it can still be dimmed down to nothing between dusk and dawn. If someone approaches, it'll flare up. And you can also set the time that a light in a garbage area stays on for. Whereas you might set the time for a light to stay at full strength in a car park area to be 1.5 minutes, maybe you only need to set the light to stay on for 30 seconds, giving someone enough time to open the garbage bin lid, put in the garbage, and then go back to their apartment. Let's move on. Fire stairs. So if you have a fire stairs in your apartment block, this is the lowest hanging fruit. This is the area that should be upgraded to motion censored LED lighting before any other area in the building. Just to give you an idea, if you had a low trafficked fire stairs that people didn't use to exit the building, and you had twin 4-foot fluorescent lights on every floor running 24 hours a day, and then you moved that to motion censored LED lighting, you would save 90% of the electricity consumed in that fire stairs. And you would have a project that probably pays itself off in under 1 year. Now, in fire stairs, you do have to adhere to safe movement again. So you can't dim down a fire stairs to nothing. You can't dim it down to 0 when no one's in there. The dim down state of the fire stairs will be at about 20% strength. A consideration here is you do need emergency battery backed up lights on the landings where the doors open into the fire escape. But if you've got lights on the half levels, you don't need to necessarily put an emergency battery backed up light into those half levels, and that can save on the cost of your project of upgrading the fire stairs. Okay, today we're going to say goodbye, farewell to the pneumatic push button. Now, in our older heritage strata buildings across Australia, those 3- and 4-story walk-up blocks that were built in the 60s and the 70s, I'm sure everyone's still seen today these pneumatic push buttons that you press when you enter at the ground floor and bring on the lights on the ground floor, the second floor, and the third floor for about a minute or a minute and a half. Well, we've now got coronavirus to deal with, and with the sensitivity around people touching lift buttons, touching light switches, there's also a sensitivity around touching pneumatic push buttons. And what you can get your electrician to do is install one of these metal plates, we've got an example, over the top of the pneumatic push buttons and bypass the pneumatic push buttons activating the circuit. You can then install motion sensored LED lights on each level, which will only turn on as needed. So, for example, someone who enters on the ground floor and goes to the second floor, there's no need for the light on the third floor to ever be brought on. So I'm sure, look, it's been a part of Australia's heritage, not so much in other countries. For example, in common areas in China, they have sound activated lighting as an alternative to the pneumatic push button. But it's today that we'll put this pneumatic push button to bed, and we'll say goodbye, and it's time to upgrade this. Another thing that we'll put to bed today is the car park sensor bank. So back in the 2000s, it was quite popular for a basement car park to have one motion sensor and all the lights in the car park connected to that one motion sensor. And when this was fluorescent lighting, this actually drove high maintenance costs for the strata building, as the fluorescent lights coming on and off on the sensor bank would actually reduce their lifespan and make them create the need for them to be replaced more often. Well, if you've got a car park sensor bank and you're going to make the change to LED lighting, get rid of the sensor bank. Don't try and preserve it and use it with LED lighting. Get the LED lighting which has onboard motion sensors just on the lights that need to be brought on. Okay, we've got to talk a little bit about compliance today, and I've chosen AS 1680 as our area. This covers safe movement in a number of different areas around the building, but we're just going to focus on the car park entry or exit. Now, what's the scenario that what was the driver for this standard to be created? If you've got someone who's just gotten into their car in the basement car park and they're going to drive out onto the street, the highest chance of an accident will actually occur when the driver's going out through the garage gate or roller door, and they might hit a pedestrian or a child on a bike coming past. And this is in the period where their eye is transitioning from being in the dark of the basement car park to the bright, sunny day outside. So this standard that's been brought in is designed to increase the light level and the lighting intensity in the 19 meters that lead up to a garage door exit before someone goes onto the street. And we mentioned earlier, 40 lux being a background level for basement car park lighting. Well, this Australian standard says during the daytime, you should have 800 lux for the first 15 meters inside a car park entry, and then 160 lux for the next 4 meters before you get down to that base level of 40 lux for the remainder of the car park. And at night time, the standard says you should have 160 lux for the first 19 meters as you enter or exit the car park area. Now, quite often strata committees say, this is the nanny state, we're not going to comply with this regulation. But there's a very practical reason that I'll outline today as to why more strata buildings should comply with this standard. And that is, in a number of strata buildings that have curtain roller doors that go up and down, these doors are consistently being hit by cars, and the curtains are being repaired, and it's not uncommon for an apartment block to spend $2,000 to $3,000 a year calling out car park gate companies to replace sections of their curtain that have been damaged because someone drove a car into it. So the business case for actually complying with this is we want to reduce the operating costs of running our garage door in and out of our strata building. And there are vendor solutions you can buy as a kit and just have installed to cater for this. It's also something, if you're getting energy saving rebates from the New South Wales Energy Savings Scheme, in order to comply to get those energy saving rebates, it's mandatory, if you're going to claim a rebate, to have this level of compliance for your car park entry and exit. Now, wireless emergency lighting networks. So this is the internet coming to create a smart building in your apartment block. A wireless emergency lighting network actually has radio communication between all the emergency lights on different floors of the apartment building. And as everyone who lives or is on a strata committee knows, every year you have to do an annual fire compliance test. And this type of system actually can report instantly onto a mobile phone or a tablet which emergency lights are working throughout the entire building. And this is less disruptive and a cheaper way of achieving your annual fire compliance. Another benefit is quite often when you have a fire compliance company come in and say a light is faulty, then you send an electrician in to find that light and replace it. Quite often the wrong light is replaced and you don't get your compliance. Well, an app connected to one of these wireless emergency lighting networks can actually have a photo of every light, which can then be given to the electrician to make sure that he replaces the right light. A couple of other innovations in this area, which are on the cutting edge. If you have a wireless lighting network in your basement car park, when a car drives in and triggers the first motion sensor on the first light in the car park, that light can actually radio through to other lights that are on the thoroughfare that the car is going to drive through and illuminate them to full strength before the car drives past. This gets around the problem of the current state of motion sensors not triggering fast enough and a car actually driving past them before in the car park area before they trigger and go up to full strength. Another instance where this wireless lighting network can be useful if it's put in a fire escape. Just say someone was to enter the fire escape on the 3rd floor, the light on the 3rd floor could communicate to the light on both the 4th and the 2nd floor and tell them to flare up to full strength. At that point, the wireless network doesn't know whether the person's going to walk to the 4th floor or the 2nd floor, but it communicates to both of them and prepares those lights for the person in advance of them getting there. So this is something that people have started to call the Internet of Light. And it's one more thing that we're going to put to rest today, and that's the good old photoelectric cell. So on the left, you can see what's called a PE sensor. In garden areas around strata buildings, for the last 20 years, these have been installed on a circuit to bring on the lighting when dusk approaches. Well, what's happened is the technology in those PE cells has been miniaturized and put on board on all the individual lights. So now there's not really a need for these photoelectric cells in outdoor areas or garden areas these days. Now it's better to invest in the lighting that has that technology built as a daylight sensor into each individual light. And for the strata buildings that have their garden lighting on a timer, sometimes it is down to an individual strata committee member to go and change the timer every time you go through daylight saving change. Well, this is a way to get rid of that job by transitioning lights that might be on a timer circuit for external garden areas to lights that have their own daylight sensor. So this is probably where we'll finish the presentation. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll hand back to Fiona and Loani, and we can take any questions.
Thank you, Brent. I didn't realise I was on mute, so my alarm was going off. Everybody might have heard that. I apologise. So we have one question here, which is how common are the wireless emergency lighting networks, i.e. is it new technology and are they expensive?
Yeah, so this is a newer technology, and I'll mention the name of the vendor because at this stage I think it's unique. I'm only aware of the one company, WBS Lighting, which is bringing this into the strata market. I would say that they've been doing research and development in this area for a number of years, and it's installed into a number of strata buildings, but I would say a very small percentage. And, you know, a wireless lighting network, if you were doing a retrofit project, it might be 20% more expensive than the equivalent project at the time you do the project. But what strata schemes typically find difficult is to look at the savings that should give you for the next 5 years on your annual fire compliance testing costs. So that's, the technology is out there. It's not bleeding edge. It's now ready for strata buildings to deploy. But think about the total cost of ownership. It's rather than, you know, a lot of strata committees just look at what's the very cheapest project that we can do on day one for an LED lighting upgrade.
Thank you. We have another question as well. How available are the daylight and motion outdoor lights, as they seem like an economy measure when most lights are on all night when no one's needing them?
Yeah, this is these are available everywhere from Bunnings to your you know, higher quality LED lighting providers such as Enlighten. So these lights, the daylight sensors are now quite common in the Oyster lights, and you'll have a range of, you know, prices, but this one's almost a no-brainer for the light that's outside the entry to the foyer. So it's just a project that you'd probably just do next week.
Okay. Somebody wanted to repeat the vendor that you mentioned. I think it was WBS Lighting, is that correct?
That's right. WBS has the wireless emergency lighting network. Yep.
Okay, so the next one is in regards to retrofitting small multi-units, e.g. 3-story walk-ups with small common areas. Do you have a dollar figure for typical annual savings for the strata building and a payback period?
Yep. To give you an idea, usually those buildings spend about $600 on their common area electricity each year. If you move to motion censored lighting, you'd probably get a payback in 2 years. It really just depends on how many lights you've got in the foyer, what drives the cost. But if we just focus on, you know, basically you'd be looking at, if your building spends $600 or $1,000 on common area electricity a year, then you'd probably see that going down to $200, $300.
Okay, another one is, why do indoor or car park lights need a moisture penetration rating when they shouldn't be subject to any water? Yeah,
so you wouldn't need an indoor light, say in a foyer or a lift lobby, to have a water resistance. In a car park area, there can be a good need, can be a good reason to get water resistance there. And if anyone knows how often you have problems with water penetration in strata buildings and water, you know, penetrating through concrete and running along the concrete slab and affecting lighting in a car park area. The other thing is to think about it in the car park area from a maintenance perspective. So if, for example, you want to do water blasting to clean your car park area once a year, you know, an IP65 light, you can basically do a gentle hose on an IP65 light and it won't be affected. So if you want to do high pressure water cleaning of your basement car park area, or protect against seepage, which, you know, water penetration, that's a reason for having IP65 or at least IP44 in basement car park areas.
And what about, Brent, small unit blocks that are just 2 stories, you know, of not a big car park, like more a carport than car park? Is it worthwhile them looking at energy savings, or are they just too small scale?
No, like one government scheme which is worth looking at in quite small blocks, and this can apply to if you've got halogen downlights in a common area or halogen downlights inside your own apartment. If you've got more than 10 halogen downlights, you can actually claim the Home Energy Efficiency Rebate, or HERE rebate, for upgrading those lights. So, you know, a project could be as little as upgrading 10 halogen downlights in a small apartment block.
Interesting. And you mentioned earlier the low-hanging fruit, I think it was car parks. I've just lost my note.
Fire escape?
Fire escapes.
Yep.
What would you suggest were the 2nd and 3rd, 4th place to go there?
Yeah, so the number 1 place to go is the fire escape. 2nd to the basement car park. 3rd would be plant garbage rooms where you've got lights that are on 24 hours a day. I'd leave the foyers to last, because when you're doing a lighting upgrade in foyers, really you've got to engage all the residents in your building, and there's more of a style of the type of lighting that you're looking for. So what we call back of house projects are the best ones, you know, fire escapes, car park, plant room.
And I just wanted to let everybody know who's listening, from a council perspective, both Lane Cove Council and Mosman Council are offering Climate Clever at the moment. I think our programs are a little bit different, so you might need to go to our individual council websites to get the details on that. But definitely for Mosman Council, that's open to all households and schools. And maybe Fiona will want to just talk a little bit on that as well. And the other thing Mosman is offering is for people to put in an expression of interest if they're living in an apartment building, in terms of apartment and strata savings program. So that link that's on the beginning of your chat is the link that you'd go to if you're a Mosman resident and you're interested. And it'll also be on our website. I don't think it's up today, but it should be there by the end of the week. So just look for it'll be Apartment and Strata Savings Program, and the link will be there for you to put on your expression of interest. That's all I need to say. I'd like to say thank you to everybody for attending, and I'll put you over to Fiona, and maybe there might be some last minute questions you might want to put in as well. Oh, look, there is one coming in. What is the typical lifespan of the lights and motion sensor of the comparison of fluoro and halogen?
Mm-hmm. So, the difference with the lights the LED lights that you're buying now in 2020 compared to, say, 5 years ago, is that you'd want at least a 5-year warranty. Some people are offering a 7-year warranty, and the actual LED pads in these lights should last 10 years. And when I say last 10 years, they've got the little lights, the little dots. Some of them will start to, you know, fade out individually, but you should have like a functional light that's still bright enough after 10 years.
Okay, and one last question before I put you back to Fiona, and that is, we've found that many LEDs don't last as long as they claim. Is it due to overheating, fluctuating voltage, or some other cause? What should one look for to get an LED which lasts well?
Yep. So look, in the LED lighting market, there is a cheap Chinese, let's call it segment of the market, which is not a high quality light. Rather than the LEDs themselves, there is an electronics driver that's on the board, and that fails on a cheaper light. So the key point I would say in the LED lighting market, and I know this is very hard for strata buildings to digest, but if you go and get 3 quotes in the LED lighting market, I would say don't take the cheapest quote. Typically, that is not a quality product, and you're better off buying a mid-range to a premium range light for the longevity. So the key point is not all LED lighting from different manufacturers is of the same quality.
Thanks, Loani. And just wrapping up for Lane Cove, we are offering Climate Clever as well. It's a web-based platform where you upload your utility bills and then you receive lots of tips and suggestions on how to reduce them. And we'll be launching that in a couple of months, along with a program where we're looking at sending out consultants to large apartments to do energy and waste and water audits. And then you would receive a report on how you can lower your emissions and your energy and your waste, and also the expected savings. So look out for that program as well. But for now, I just want to say thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you. And as Brent said, we've got 3 more webinars coming up. So when we send out the survey, we'll send out a reminder in case you want to RSVP for those if you haven't already. So thanks very much, and thanks, Brent, for your wealth of knowledge. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Lots of positive feedback.
Good one. So we're safe? We're off camera?
Not yet.